This is Football at 4.
Josh Hennig and Nick Earnshaw filling in for Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. A Friday edition of Football at 4 means Adam Caplan is back for more conversation as we are counting down the days. Eagles players report on Tuesday. First practice Wednesday, 10 a.m. It's right there. It's right around the corner is football. And Adam Caplan joins us here on the Sports Bash. Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget about the Inside the Birds YouTube channel and Patreon as well. Adam, how you doing today?
Josh, good to be with you. Yes, so every practice with the Eagles this summer at home at NovaCare is going to be at 10 a.m. Now, of course, we've got the Lincoln Financial practice on Thursday, August 1st. That practice is at 6:30, and the fans could go to that, and that's the only one that's open to the fans unless you have business with Eagles. You can't get in to NovaCare to watch them. It's changed over the years, but that's the way it is. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting, Josh. We know the Eagles' practices are generally very light, but I always say, like, when you go to practice, pay attention to the depth charts. They don't really mean much in the off season, but they sure do once training camp starts.
Well, one of the guys that we are all having an interesting eye on for a variety of reasons, that being Jalen Hurts. And Adam, it's not like Hurts had a horrible year last year. He had more passing and rushing touchdowns in the 2022 MVP finalist campaign, but there were still issues in his game last year. So talk about how the Eagles are going to get Jalen back on track.
Yeah, so what our subject matter is going to be, Josh, on our Monday show on Inside the Birds with Jeff Mosher and I, is we're going to give you our storylines. Now, it's generally like, okay, what do we see are the issues? What jobs are open, and what do we need to see for this team to make a deep playoff run? So obviously, it always starts with the quarterback. With 32 NFL teams, it's not just the Eagles. It's the number one position in professional sports. And Hurts had a very uneven season, certainly dropped off. There's no questions what the tape showed. Didn't process nearly as well as the season before. There were issues with the offensive scheme. We don't have an hour to talk about this situation. Though on Inside the Birds on Monday, we're going to go probably 10 or 15 minutes on it, I'm sure. But I would say just getting him back on track. And we've said since Kellen Moore was hired that the word around the league is this is a really good, friendly scheme for quarterbacks. We know the offseason wasn't great for their offense because Hurts had to learn yet another offensive scheme, several of them going back to high school. So he's got to get used to it, and they're going to have to put him on the fast track here. But that would be the number one issue coming to training camp of a lot on this football team is getting the quarterback back to where he was 2 years ago. And just get him to, Josh, getting him to play consistently solid football.
Hey, Adam, it's Nick here. I want to talk about the interior offensive line a little bit, especially right guard. You bring in Mekhi Becton, you bring in Matt Hennessy, you also have Tyler Steen there. What is that battle going to look like heading into training camp?
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting things. Before they signed Mekhi Becton, I mean, you could have probably put Tyler Steen as the starter in a light pen. Now it's kind of like in pencil. So, yeah, Max Sharping certainly will not be starting. The only question is, and we know Becton fill in at the left guard spot for Landon Dickerson in the final camp, the mandatory camp, because Dickerson was away. But when you really look at it, Nick, they really want Tyler Steen to start at right guard. They drafted him to be that guy, to be the starter. What's done this last summer, and we never saw this coming, is they wouldn't even let him compete for it. They handed it to Kim Jurgens. There was no competition. That was bizarre. So we learned our lesson. Hey, you know what? You can't just say he's a lock to win it. Now you add Mekhi Becton, who's never played guard before, and as we reported first and exclusively via our Jeff Mosher on Inside the Birds, the Eagles wanted to cross-train Becton. They thought he could handle playing inside at guard, and he's never played it, but he didn't look like a fish out of water, so to speak. So we're very anxious at that first practice on Wednesday. I know it most likely will be an hour or less. That's typical. And we know that the first 4 or 5 practices, because they have what's called the acclimation period that teams run now, it's kind of mandatory that you can't go heavy. But I pay attention to depth charts. I pay attention to that. I want to see where Becton's lining up. Is he going to line up at left tackle? Is it back up to Mailata? Fred Johnson, by the way, if that's the case, if they have Becton at right guard, well, then Fred Johnson will definitely be the backup. But we'll take an eye on that. We're going to keep an eye on that when we get to training camp next week.
Talk with Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Like, subscribe, share it with your friends. Adam, of course, on Twitter X as well, at Caplan NFL. Adam, speaking of competition on the defensive side, inside linebacker specifically, because we know they brought in some interesting guys. Devin White, we know he's a first-round pick. They brought in other guys like Zach Bond. Fangio has talked about him. So what are you keeping an eye on with the inside linebackers?
All right, so the competition and talent's better now. How much better it is remains to be seen. Zach Bond is moving from an edge rush standpoint, though he didn't really play much as an edge rusher for the Saints. He's mostly a special teams player. About 25% of the defensive snaps during his 4 years with the Saints. He's going to line up an inside linebacker initially. Doesn't mean he won't be cross-trained at both. You got Devin White, Nakobe Dean, who's got to stay on the field, Oren Burks, Trotter Jr., and Van Sumeren. So they've gotten mostly younger. They've gotten more talented. I know you could go through each linebacker and bring up issues. That's true. That's a fact. But there's going to be really good competition. And it's just you don't know what you're going to get in the end. And not only will training camp tell you, but the preseason's going to give us a lot. They're probably going to have to – we haven't really talked about this before, Josh, but they're probably going to have to play these guys a lot because, sure, Devin White, I mean, it's not a lock, but most likely he'll start this season, certainly not a lock. If it's close between, let's say, Dean, Bond, White, Burks for the starting jobs, for those two inside backer jobs in this scheme, then they're going to have to play these guys a lot in the preseason to find out who's going to be the winner. So this is another one where, you know what, this could be pretty good competition.
Adam, speaking of competition, looking at the cornerback position, I mean, there's the logjam of young players there. Obviously they drafted Cooper DeJean as well as Quinyon Mitchell. They have Kaylee Ringo as well. Looking at the future of the cornerback position, what are your expectations heading in to training camp this year?
Yeah, so Nick, here's something I got today, and this is interesting. Actually, I should say over the last 24 hours. So I was talking to a defensive coach who works for an NFC team who his job for the draft was he was assigned corners and linebackers, a really front seven player. He didn't get safeties, he was given corners. He said, I'm going to be honest with you, DeJean is not a corner at the next level. I told him that the Eagles may play him there. He goes, that just, he doesn't see it. He goes, it's not going to work. He goes, this guy's a safety. You could play him as a nickel backer, a nickel corner, inside corner, but he goes, overall, this guy's an athlete. You want to play him at safety where he's got good range. So the question will be, you brought up corner. Well, what's the competition look like? Unless he's not ready, we've said this now since the draft, unless Quinyon Mitchell's not ready, he's going to start week one opposite Slay. I mean, that's happening. Again, as long as he's ready. And the question is, with Isaiah Rodgers had a good offseason. We don't really know what that means other than he's in really good shape. He looked good. They'll bring him to camp. We'll see what the competition looks like there opposite Darius Slay. He's on a one-year prove-it deal. This could wind up being a steal, by the way. If he could capitalize on this opportunity and he knows he's kind of running out of chances here, this could wind up being an absolute steal. And then you've got Ringo, who also in his second year didn't do much as a rookie, got to play late after a really rough training camp. And he kind of opened some eyes. He also had a good offseason. So we'll see kind of what that looks like. Eli Ricks was ahead of Ringo last year, mostly. He fell behind a little bit, so let's see if he can catch up. They've got a ton of competition for the nickel position. They've got at least four guys who can play it. Then you got James Bradbury, who the only question with Bradbury is he's going to play some safety. Will they let him play outside corner? We don't know that yet. We're going to learn that in training camp. Zach McPherson's back as most likely a nickel inside corner. So you're right, they're going to have a lot of competition. It's going to be better. As we said, with Inside the Birds, depth is not about how many guys you have. It's about the quality of the position. Never forget that, folks. When people tell you how deep a team was, we told people last summer they are not deep at outside corner, despite what people thought. We were right. The talent level is better. I'm just fascinated to see what they're going to do here because they've got guys who can play. And we're going to learn how good we're going to really learn about how the offseason was, whether you could just throw the stuff out that you saw in the offseason based on the competition in training camp and how these guys do against this excellent top end of the Eagles receiver corps.
Speaking of guys we have questions about, we know who the starters are at wide receiver. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, arguably the best tandem in the NFL. But the question, Adam, is who is the backup? Because they drafted Aeneas Williams. They brought in John Ross. Joseph Bengata has been hanging around this team. Britton Covey is still here. You got a veteran like Paris Campbell. There's a lot of people, but we know, Adam, not all of them are going to make this team.
Yeah, we have to understand, Josh, is that a lot of these guys have not played, really. Johnny Wilson, rookie, you mentioned. Aeneas Smith can only play inside. The Eagles are excited about him. Britton Covey has barely played, and he's only a slot receiver. He's a punt returner, one of the best. Joseph Ngata has never caught a pass in a game. Shaquan Davis has never caught a pass in a game. Austin Watkins, the Eagles know a little bit. He's kind of a young journeyman. They want to see if he could compete for the number 4 job. Paris Campbell right now, unless the Eagles sign a veteran, we expect them before the season starts to add another veteran. They have to, Josh. Don't have to do it now, but eventually they're going to have to because they need experience and they need a doomsday plan. In Kellen Moore's scheme, and we've talked about this really since he was hired, he's going to be very high in what we call 11 personnel, 3 receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 back. That's if everybody's healthy. With the Chargers last season, his plans were foiled because of major injury problems. But his history shows, going back with Dallas, if he's got enough players, they're going to play a lot of heavy 11. They're going to play some 10, which is 4 receivers, guys and 1 back and no tight ends. He'll do that too if he believes in the receivers. So guys like Johnny Wilson have a real shot to contribute. Aeneas Smith, who came on late in OTAs because he was coming back from his foot problem, which he had a procedure on, and they just don't have the experience. They're really light on depth. This is really an issue for me, Josh. They can't afford one injury. If Paris Campbell doesn't show up and perform well, and by the way, he got benched. He got benched for, we were told, we reported this at the time of signing, he got benched because of practice performance. He's got to be better, and they don't have a parachute here. There's really no one else, guys. So this is a position, they're backups that bear watching in training camp.
Adam, looking at the interior part of the defensive line, obviously Fletcher Cox retires, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, they now have to step up. Behind them, Milton Williams, Tui Pelotu, those guys, what should people know about the defensive line behind Carter, behind Davis heading into next year?
Yeah, so Nick, what they're going to do is they're going to, in this scheme, and we saw this last year, you basically play with 3 down linemen. It's really 3 guys down. It'll be Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter. 2 guys up. They play on the ball. The outside, they're really not linebackers. They're edge rushers. Bryce Huff, obviously, and Josh Sweat will be your starters. That's your 5-man front. But behind that, and you just mentioned it, Moro Jomo barely played as a rookie. But the Eagles are very high on him. We said this since he was drafted and just didn't contribute. They have nothing in terms of experience. In fact, they're the only NFL team that does not have a vested veteran on their defensive line. There's another team that had only 1 guy, but the Eagles have 0. So there's no parachute here, guys. They can't afford an injury. This is another one. We expect them to add a vested veteran, someone who's been there and done that before the NFL season starts. You don't have to do it right now. You don't have to do it to start a training camp. But at some point they're going to have to add it because there's no parachute here now without Fletcher Cox. This is something to watch. And another guy to watch is Gabe Hall, who's got a lot of talent, untapped talent from Baylor. I mean, this guy's 6'6", 300 pounds, a lot of ability, really underachieved at Baylor. He's going to be coached by Clint Hurt, one of the best D-line coaches in the National Football League. Keep an eye on him in training camp.
He's Adam Caplan at Caplan NFL on the Twitter X platform. Inside the Birds is the podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, don't forget about the Inside the Birds on YouTube, as well as Inside the Birds on Patreon. And the next edition of the pod drops Monday morning. Right, Adam?
Correct. Yes, 6 a.m. And also for Patreon, we make our announcements for the fall on Monday morning as well. So can't wait to announce that. We've got some big surprises. And let's just say Greg Cosell, our friend from NFL Films, is going to be heavily involved in what we do going forward on Patreon.
Very, very cool. Adam, great stuff today. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll talk soon.
You too, guys. Thanks.